Well, thank you for joining us, Judith. I appreciate, you're always the go-to person when things happen in general in our country these days, but specifically when there are what I feel like complicated questions about what is happening in our courts. And this decision by the Fifth Circuit, which I will say that I text you and was like, please, I text the chat and I was like, please, to my lawyer friends, explain how it is that a court in the United States of America just opened the door for resegregation. Now, we know we've talked about the way that the federal government has been allowing for kind of resegregation, both in the government and its agencies, putting in policies that strip away protections for civil rights. We've seen this particularly in the Department of Education. But this decision that I almost missed feels really like what in the Jim Crow is happening. So can you tell us just a little bit about what the decision was and what the implications are for schools, not just in Louisiana, but across the country?
Sure. So this is a case that's in Concordia Parish in Louisiana. And it's an old school desegregation case that, most of these cases come from the 50s and 60s,
Right.
but they have stayed around. It's important to understand that they have stayed around because when we litigate these cases, we want the courts to maintain supervision because these are school districts that continue to do wrong by Black students. And
Right.
so these cases have stayed around because they have allowed us to, when something comes up, let's say they decide to close a school or they've redistricted the school boundaries, et cetera, we can go back into court. And if there's a racially discriminatory angle problem, then we bring that to the court. And so
Right.
they've remained under court supervision. But here you have the Fifth Circuit saying enough already. But this is the thing,
Right.
Adrian. So when you text me, like I was like, and right? And I'm
Yeah.
saying and because the Trump administration has been very aggressive at going after these cases that they're a party to, right? Because the federal
Yeah.
government has been a protector of civil rights. They
Right.
are actually a a party in most of these school desegregation cases. They're the ones supposed to be
Right.
protecting Black kids, right?
Right. They are
And
supposed to
here
bring the protections.
they're
Yes.
the ones who are there. They are the lawyers for the people. And they are
Right.
there. They have brought a lot of these cases. The Legal Defense Fund and the Lawyers Committee are in a lot of those cases, also representing Black students. But the federal government has played this critical role in school desegregation cases since the beginning of school desegregation cases.
Right.
So
Right.
now, fast forward, the Trump administration doesn't like court supervision of school districts and in school desegregation cases because they actually don't believe that there is any racial discrimination going on except against white people, right?
Right.
And so
Yeah.
what they've been doing is that they have aggressively been going after these consent decrees and trying to shut them down. And in particular, what they've been doing, which is different from the past, is that they have entered into agreements with the local school district or the state to end the court supervision. So this is a problem because while you're dismantling and closing down the Department of Education, getting rid of
Hmm.
all the regulations that actually keep Black students safe from discrimination, you're
Right.
also getting out of the litigation that has been there on the books for decades that has
Right.
allowed us to actually continue to enforce. And the thing is, people might think, oh, school desegregation cases, these are, oh, let me tell you, I litigated a case where the lawyer for the school district was the same lawyer who opposed desegregation back in 1960 something. And he's
Right.
still the person, and you still have county like school board members who have been on
Yeah.
school boards since the beginning of
Right.
time. They don't have any kids there. And
Right.
so, and we know
Their
just what the
grandkids are gone out of
right,
the school
right. So
district.
they,
Yeah.
and we know that racial discrimination is not historic; it's also current day. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
so this is problematic. They've done it in several districts in Louisiana. There's apparently about 130 consent decrees that are left at Department of Justice, and they're just going to shut
Wow.
down all of those. And I think it's
Well,
important to understand that it's not just this, it's also in policing.
yeah, so let's come to that one in a second, but I do want to just um make a connection to, I mean, yes, the thing that you said about they're for most people they're like school, desegregation is like that's like
Right,
we have integrated schools, right? Like there's not going to be discrimination in schools. That's just not true. And the sort of breaking down of the legal protections, right,
right,
that said that you cannot discriminate against people based on race going to schools. That feels like a sort of opening of a new front, but it
right,
also brings us back to the questions that many of the justices that now sit on the Supreme Court were asked during their Senate hearings, which was, do you think that Brown v. Board was properly decided on? And they would not answer, right?
right.
And so it just makes me, I mean, we know about Project 2025 and all of the dismantling of public education that exists, the policies that exist inside of that document. And it really is just playing out before our eyes. But also, I guess, one should be thinking about as we see all these cases going up to the Supreme Court, and with the exception of birthright citizenship, right? They
Hmm.
have ruled terribly, right, on
Right.
anything that is about protecting Black folks. We talk about the connection to voting rights as well. I mean, you were about to talk about the police consent decrees, but obviously, one of the things that the court said in its voting rights decisions is, yeah, no one needs to give oversight to anyone anywhere, right? It doesn't matter
Right.
what their history of stopping Black people from voting is.
Right.
We no longer need anyone to have oversight. That's voting rights.
Right.
But you have these justices that now sit on the Supreme Court who refuse to answer whether or not
Hmm.
that Brown v. Board was decided properly. This
Right.
feels like some cases being sent up to the Supreme Court, or the potential for some of these cases to get sent up to the Supreme Court, for the Supreme Court to say,
Right.
actually, we no longer need those protections at all in our public school system.
Right. I mean, and they are dismantling the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Amendment,
Right. Yeah.
just across the board. And so they're chipping away at it, and they're going to find every walk of life to do that in, right?
Yeah.
So affirmative
Hmm.
action, let's get rid of
Yeah.
that because we're over
Yeah.
that. We're fine.
Hmm.
Schools, you can go anywhere if you are smart enough, right?
Right. Right.
So the Voting Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, we don't need that any longer because, we've got Black elected officials, they would say, right?
Right.
And we've got,
Except for the ones
and
we're trying to get rid of.
right, right, exactly. And then and black voters can vote. So what are we
Right.
talking about? So they
Right.
they really have I mean, this has been their agenda. It's been their
Yeah.
agenda for a long time. Before Project 2025,
Yeah.
they want to say we are in a colorblind society, so we no longer need protections, civil rights protections for Black and brown people.
Right.
And in fact, this Department of Justice would say that we only need civil protections for white men,
Right.
because they are
That
the
is what they're
aggrieved
saying.
ones who have lost
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. You were starting to go into a conversation about consent decrees in general, that
So,
are that are being that
yeah,
undermined, right, thrown out, not just when we think about schools being protected, but also in terms of police departments that have a pattern and practice of abuse.
right.
Talk about that and the sort of the connection of these
Right.
things.
Right. So, Department of Justice, right, again, is the federal protector of our civil rights. And, we it's not too long ago that we remember that they investigated police departments,
Right.
went into court, got them under court supervision with monitors in place, etc. Now, some of us would say that those consent decrees weren't that great, or whatever, the reforms weren't that great, but it was a way in which the feds could come in and hold police departments accountable.
Yeah.
The Trump administration is DOJ is pulling out of those. So, wasn't that
Yeah.
long ago, George Floyd, Minneapolis, they've gotten out of that one.
Right.
In
Yeah.
Minneapolis, where we have
Right.
seen continued problems with the police, in
Right.
Cleveland, in Louisville, where Breonna Taylor
Right.
was murdered by the police.
Yeah.
In Newark, New Jersey, in New Orleans, they're closing these things down. And see, the problem is that, like, the feds played an important role in intervening on behalf of Black people. It's very difficult for organizations and
Yeah.
of lawyers to bring these kinds of cases because the
Yeah.
Department of Justice has standing to get information that we couldn't get as
Right.
civil rights
Yeah.
attorneys, right?
Right.
They can go to a court and be like, we want a consent decree in ways that private attorneys and organizations cannot.
Yeah.
And they have pattern and practice cases. We can't bring pattern and practice cases as civil
Hmm.
rights organizations. So we need to be clear about, like, these things that are happening all add up to the
You're right.
Fed saying no more civil rights protections. Not only are we going to try and gut them through the courts, but we're also going to make sure that the feds, who have played an incredibly important role since Jim Crow and before, are not
Right.
there to protect us any longer.
Yeah, and so we are just over 100 days to the midterm election. And while, no one advocates that voting is everything and that if you vote, every single thing is going to change, but these are the decisions
Right.
that the federal government makes, right? And we're talking about electing U.S. members of Congress, members of the U.S. Senate. These are the places that we have a system of checks and balances for a reason. But that when we say elections have consequences, these are the actual consequences.
Right.
That we now have a federal government that refuses to intervene where clear discrimination is happening across a whole range, whether it's police departments, whether it's voting rights, whether it is school segregation, Judith. Segregation. We're talking about bringing back segregation because it's simply not needed anymore. And I think that
And
I would
many schools still haven't desegregated, right? Districts haven't
right,
desegregated. So they're like, good, this is good. Let's just keep
right.
it this way.
Right. And this is, I think, again, this sort of like, are when you talked about the school boards and people sitting on school boards forever and making these decisions, I'll just say again, when we think about elections, there's all kinds of elections, right? That folks need to be paying attention to make sure that their communities
Right.
and their kids, quite frankly, in this case, are protected. All right. Judith Browne Dianis, always good
Thank
to talk
you.
to you. I am
Thank
always trying to
you.
figure these things out and always calling, and always bothering you, quite frankly. Texting, calling,
I'm like, oh,
explaining.
Adrian.
I appreciate you breaking this down for us. We will have you
Thanks.
back again and again and again. Thank you.
Thank you.